Climates are indicated on this map by being colored in. The type D climates are the so-called moist continental climates. They're going to have very cold winters with summer seasons. There's going to be plenty of precip. Precip is not the problem in these climate zones, but rather the bitter cold of the winter. The climate is almost always dominated by large continents. You see that all the type D climates are in the northern hemisphere, and they're in North America and in Eurasia. There's broadly two types of type D climates. The humid continental climates are best example of those would be the Midwest. The Midwest, the high plains, lots of parts of Canada are example type D climates. They get precipitation throughout the year. There's no dry season in Nebraska. There's no dry season in the Midwest. On the other hand, we have hot summers and we have very cold, bitter winters. Any kind of vegetation that's going to live in the Midwest then needs to be able to deal with the very severe winters. Only certain kinds of trees and certain types of grasses and so on are going to be able to survive that. Which is part of the reason why, especially in from Nebraska and states and provinces to our north, the climate largely doesn't have trees. Most of the varieties of trees that can survive on the amount of precipitation we receive in Nebraska don't survive with these kind of temperatures. A good rule of thumb when thinking about type D climates, especially in the Midwest, think about buffalo or bison. If bison live there, it's probably a type D climate. However, there's another type of type D climate, and that is the type of climate suggested by taiga. Taiga is northern forest. Like, think Alaska, think northern Canada, think the forested areas of Siberia. And taiga is a type of forest that can survive on places like Alaska and northern Canada and Yukon get maybe 20 inches of rain a year. In parts of, say, Arizona or New Mexico, that would give a desert. But in Alaska, where the evaporation rate is so low, it supports northern forest, or taiga. Taiga, of course, has very severe winters. You expect to have long, protracted, very cold winters, followed by cool, short summers. Here's just some nice pictures of taiga-type climate. Taiga is a biome, and it is typical of a type D climate in, say, Alaska or northern Canada, or Scandinavia and other parts of northern Europe. Our type E climates are going to be the polar climates. There's going to be different kinds of polar climates. For example, we're going to have ice caps. Ice caps are going to occur in, for example, the interior of Greenland, Antarctica, and other places where the ice can be up to 1 kilometer thick or even more. There'll be periods of the year where there's absolutely no sunlight, 24 hours a day of darkness. All of the polar ice cap climates occur in places where there's very little precipitation, maybe less than 4 inches of rain a year. There's going to be no real vegetation in the polar ice cap climates. There may be some bacteria or some lichens or something that live on the ice itself, but in general there's just no vegetation there. This is a little village on the coast of Greenland, and you can see, I mean, even with people there's no way they can grow anything. This is just a simple fishing village. Ice cap climates, though, are in contrast to the tundra climates. Tundra is a biome in which the ground is frozen through most of the year, and the area gets very little precipitation, definitely less than about 8 inches of precipitation per year. But for about a month a year or so, the ground thaws. Through most of the year, the ground is permafrost, but when the ground thaws, grasses, flowers, and certain kinds of lichens and even certain small dwarf trees can survive. But all of these plants have to have very shallow roots because the ground is dominated by permafrost. This guy here is sitting on some permafrost. You can see about a meter thick into the permafrost, there's still roots of plants and some you can see some soil, but below that the soil is frozen. And so none of the plants can have roots down into that deep layer. Here's just another picture that shows some permafrost where it's been exposed. You can see how the surface has thawed during the summer, but below that it's still frozen solid. Tundra climates tend to occur in places like northern Canada and northern Alaska, where vast expanses of grasses and wildflowers and dwarf trees dominate the environment during the short summer season. Tundra climates tend to be very good environments for migratory birds, in part because there's relatively few predators in this kind of environment. Birds can fly away, but how would a wolf get away from here when the winter came? So tundra and permafrost. Tundra is the biome, permafrost is the type of soil that you expect to see in a type E climate if it isn't actually a polar ice cap climate. Our final type of climates are going to be the type H climates. Type H stands for highland climates. And I don't have a map of the highland climates because they occur in a variety of places around the world, like the Alps, the Rockies, the Andes, the Himalayas, the high altitudes of the Indonesian archipelago, places like Irian Jaya. And what makes highland climates so interesting is that you have a large number of very different climate types in a small region. For example, up near the top of the mountains you might have glaciers. It may be well above the tree line, and so you don't actually have any vegetation up at the top of the mountains. However, as you work your way towards lower and lower elevations, you'll start seeing climates that look more like tundra or steppe, with luxuriant vegetation during a small part of the year. Sometimes these are good grazing lands. You can see there's a goat in this picture. Up near the tree line, there can be nice grasses. Here too is kind of a steppe-like, or this is probably steppe up at high elevation. What trees there are at these elevations tend to be more like a thicket than like normal trees. You tend to get these kind of dense thickets of little sticky trees that aren't really like a nice forest. At even lower elevations, you will get a more scrub-like type of vegetation. This type of vegetation biome has a name. We call this chaparral. Chaparral are thickets of low trees and shrubs, and they're typically found at fairly high altitudes, especially if the climate is fairly dry. When you're thinking about chaparral, probably your best way to compare it is to think about the TV show MASH. Okay, the TV show MASH was filmed in chaparral that was out in Central California, and it is in a highland type of climate. Okay, I hope this information has helped. There's lots more information about climate controls and climate classification in your textbook, on the class website, and so on. One thing I do want to stress is there's lots of vocabulary in this unit of the course. Think about all the different biomes and all the different climate types and so on that we've learned about. So make sure you review all these important concepts. Alright, let me know if you have any questions, and this has been Dr. John Schrage, copyright 2005.